What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my refined review and builds guide for Petra, Fallen Female Corrin, Cynthia and Python. So Petra ends up getting a pretty solid weapon refine that can make her into a good beast slayer, and the beast effective damage is really useful when we do have a couple of beast units in the metagame. We also have a couple of far save tanks which Petra can try and decimate. She also has -1 special cooldown with her weapon, so it can definitely help with that. So with this weapon refine, she is able to get +8 to all of her stats, and on top of that, she's able to get +6 to all of her stats after comparing her visible stats with an ally that is within 3 spaces of her after subtracting her visible stats by 4. So that might sound a bit confusing, but I'll try and simplify it. So for example, she has got visible attack of 48, so she'll subtract 4 from it and end up at 44 attack. So if there's any kind of ally with more visible attack than 44, then she ends up getting +6 attack. So each stat is calculated independently, and it's pretty easy to get all of these stats honestly, because Petra doesn't really have the highest base stat total because of being a ranged flyer and also not being the most modern unit. And she also doesn't have the highest attack stat. So getting these in combat stats is definitely going to be a lot easier than it seems because of modern units just having very high stats now. So if you do run her with them, then she can definitely get like up to +14 to all of her stats, which is definitely quite a lot. With the refinery part of her weapon, she's able to get the half null follow up, so she can bypass the follow-up negation effects of a lot of tanks and armor units, which can definitely make it a lot easier to kill them, especially because she's going to be faster than them. And finally, if the foe is at full HP, then in her player phase, she's able to get the null guard and 60% damage reduction. So having null guard with -1 special cooldown makes it pretty easy to trigger Ruptured Sky, Luna and lethality, so it definitely makes her job easier. And because she needs the opponent to be at full HP, probably do not use her with the units who can chip the opponent's HP or with AoE units, because then she's not going to be getting her null guard. So definitely don't use her with the upheaval of Duma. Getting 60% damage reduction can actually make her deceptively bulky, so even though she can technically run Wind Sweep with the half null follow up, she wouldn't really need it with the damage reduction that she can get. Again, this damage reduction is completely pierceable by Deadeye, lethality and all of those specials, but still overall it is going to be adding to her longevity and her bulk, and null guard is definitely going to be making it easier to trigger her specials. Unfortunately, she doesn't really have any kind of way of getting special acceleration other than heavy blade, so depending on Duochrome, Asker, Veluria or Legendary Hector is going to be helpful, so it can help you bring down the cooldown of lethality. And at first it might seem like she's not going to be that good with her base stats and this weapon refine, but honestly this is a huge improvement, and Petra can function as a much better ranged nuke. Probably not to the level of like Summer Lin, who can dispose Duoduma really consistently, but still Petra is able to deal with a lot of far save tanks, especially red ones, and also a lot of beast units with the beast effective damage, despite not having the highest attack stats. So she can kind of compensate that with the extra stats that she can get in the combat, and also by running Ruptured Sky or lethality. Petra can definitely have a place competitively in Aether Raids defense, especially in the Dark Season with Yoon and Brattle Katria, and she can also function in Summoner Duels S because of the reasons which I stated before. And if you get more beast units in the future with like Embla and Elm, then the blue color with the beast effective damage is definitely going to be helping you. And if you get like a newer Asker or something like that, then that would also be pretty good, but I may be getting ahead of myself. So overall pretty happy with the kind of weapon refine that she ended up getting, which makes her a much better ranged nuke. So if you want to build her up on a budget, then you can simply double down on the attack speed form and run that as a Sacred Seal. And Luna is going to be working fine as a special, because if the enemy counter attacks, then she can trigger this in a single round of combat because of having that null guard. But if you want to invest a bit more into her, then the standard skills like attack speed catch and the trace skill and the range skill is going to be the option. The cat skill does have pretty similar synergy to her weapon refine, as both of these do want the enemy to be at full HP, so getting the max offenses out of the cat skill is definitely going to be pretty nice. And there are not too many options for a ranged flyer, so she can definitely run Fortress skill. You can even run Wind Sweep if you want to, but because of the 60% damage reduction, she's not going to be dying all that easily, so you can definitely run Fortress a lot safely compared to the other ranged nukes, which are just going to be dying on the retaliation. At max investment, Petra can definitely be built up with some expensive skills, so you can run attack speed unity on her and oath skill, and even though the oath skill can give you the visible attack and speed, it is still not going to be high enough if you run her with some modern units, as they're just going to be having higher visible stats. So the Oath Force skill can enable the teleportation without the aerobatics, and because we do not have the trace skill on the slot B, it can definitely function fine. So Seal Defense 4 as the slot B skill can give you even more defense debuff on the opponent, which can make it a lot easier for her to one round KO. And with this kind of weapon, you definitely want to kill an opponent in a single round, because if they're not at full HP, then Petra doesn't get the null guard and the damage reduction. And even if she gets panicked, the Unity skill is going to be coming there to save you from the debuffs, and Ruptured Sky can be pretty helpful for doubling down on the boosted damage against the beast units, and also getting the boosted damage against the dragon units. So with the null guard of her weapon, she can easily trigger Ruptured Sky on her follow-up attack, and even if the foe can counter attack, she can pretty much survive most of the time because of the damage reduction that she can get. I think speed IV is pretty important on her, so definitely try and get that first, and then attack could be ascended later on if you want to spend a florette on her. So outspeeding the opponent and triggering your special on the double is really important so that you can just kill them in that single round of combat. She can also be used competitively, like I said, and she can definitely be used in summoner duels with lethality. So you would need some support with like Duochrome and Asker, bringing down lethality to 3 cooldown. The decharging of Duma's breath is definitely going to be pretty annoying as well, so providing more support to her is going to be helpful. And if she can get some special acceleration support with Duo Thor's World Breaker or like Fallen Ninian, then that is definitely going to be making it easy to trigger lethality. And you can even use Battle Katria with her so that she can quad attack. So that is definitely going to be helpful against Duo Duma matchup, and Duo Duma is one of the more popular Farsafe tanks, and Asker is also a pretty popular frontliner. So the effective damage can definitely help you there, and there's also Mufasa. But killing those kinds of units is definitely going to be depending on the investment that the foe has on them, and the investment your Petra has, and the support that she has with either Duochrome, Asker, Duo Thor, or like Bridal Katria. But she can definitely function in Summoner Duels S with a build like this. And you can also use her in Aether Raids defense, again with Bridal Katria, because you can just quad attack pretty easily, and when you run Windsweep, you can just trigger lethality on your final hit, and you don't really need any kind of special acceleration if you can just run Windsweep. And even if you get counter-attacked by a dragon unit, the damage reduction is definitely going to be helping you survive, and you can trigger lethality. Speed Defense Rain can work as her slotsy skill, but if you want to hyper optimize for Aether Raids defense, then Blue Feud or Colorless Feud can be good options depending on your team. So if you want to deal with Brave Hector and Ascended Idun and also Brave Dimitri, then Blue Feud is going to be pretty helpful. But if you want to deal with Mufasa and like colorless Farsafe tanks, then Colorless Feud is definitely going to be pretty nice. I do like her on the Dark Season, honestly, because you can use her with Medius so that he can buff up your attack. And Medius is going to be having higher attack than Petra very easily, so she can get the in-combat stats. And then Yune can also provide you with the debuffs and the panic. So that is also very helpful in getting the one-round KOs, which Petra definitely needs with her weapon refine needing the foe to be at full HP. And finally, if you do use her in Arena, then you can use her with Ruptured Sky instead of lethality so that you can trigger Ruptured Sky in a single round of combat, and even if the foe cannot counter attack, you can at least trigger it on your double. And in Arena, the Fortress mobility is definitely going to be pretty nice, so you can run that, and she's mainly going to be functioning in the player phase. Fallen Female Corrin doubles down on her solo condition to become even bigger stat ball, and the description of this weapon is definitely pretty long, but pretty much the primary condition takes the number 7 and subtracts the number of allies within 2 spaces multiplied by 2. So obviously if there is no ally within 2 spaces of her, she's able to get max plus 7 to all of her stats. She can also get debuff neutralization if there's 1 or less ally within 2 spaces of her. And this is really useful because a lot of infantry units would try to run Unity skill, but that wouldn't really work with her playstyle. And then she can get plus 4 to all of her stats in combat on top of that. So pretty much in total she can get plus 11 to all of her stats if there's no ally within 2 spaces of her. So she can become a pretty big stat ball. And then finally there's a big description, and what it boils down to is basically Dragon's Wrath 5 if there is no ally within 2 spaces of her. So she's able to get 30% damage reduction on foe's first attack, and she can do 30% true damage on her first attack depending on her attack stat minus foe's resistance. So this is going to be able to provide her with some kind of damage reduction and also provide her with better one-shot potential with the adaptive damage that she has got. And if there's one ally within 2 spaces of her, then she's at least going to be getting Dragon Strat 3, which does give you 20% damage reduction and 20% true damage. So overall, Fallen Female Corrin is definitely a unique unit who, tries to really do the solo playstyle, which isn't really all that common anymore because we have so many really good support units like Elimine, Muspel, and Thor. And we also have so many drive skills and so many skills that work in the proximity of 2 spaces. So unfortunately, Fallen Female Corrin is going to be deprived of that kind of close support. If you have a skill that can work in 3 spaces, then she can get the advantage of that and still get all of these stats with her weapon. But basically, with this kind of weapon, you need to send her away from her team, just yeet her away with someone like Legendary Eliwood who can provide the global support, and she's able to get the extra stats and function as a stat ball. Obviously, she's not going to be as potent as someone like Halloween Female Corrin that we just got, but because of being colorless unit and because of being able to stack up so many stats, at higher investment she can definitely function as a pretty good mixed phase unit. But yeah, the kind of support that you can give to her is definitely going to be limited. So the modes that you can use her in effectively and the teammates that you need with her are definitely pretty limited because most units do want to have the ally support or get some kind of support to stack up even more stats and function better as a unit. But Corrin wants to be away from her team. So she's pretty unique in that aspect, but it does have its shortcomings. You can definitely use her in Summoner Duels S as a raid boss. That is going to be the most effective way because you can just use her with Legendary Eliwood and just smite her way into the enemy team and just terrorize them with her stats and the weapon refine. But in something like Arena, it's not going to be that easy, and especially in Aether Raids, it is also not going to be that easy because if you are too far away from your team, you're probably going to die to something like Brattle Katria team or like a lot of units just ganging up on you. So again, it does have its shortcomings, but she can definitely function as a stat ball with this refine, and getting Dragon Strat 5 and the debuff neutralization is definitely pretty good for her combat. So if you want to build her up on a budget, then you can run the double solo skills and run null follow-up. So this is something you could do at low investment, and this is going to be working out fine because she's just able to stack up so much stats. It's just that you have to give her the right amount of support, especially at low investment. So Legendary Eliwood is pretty much going to be the main unit that you can support her with. If you want to invest a bit more into her, then attack speed ideal is definitely much better as you can get more offenses out of this, and speed smoke 4 is going to be giving you more damage reduction. So it can stack up with the damage reduction of her savage breath and can make her overall a lot more tanky. Finally, if you want to heavily invest into her, then attack speed finish 4 from Halloween Corrin is actually a pretty good option along with Dragon Strat 4 because you're able to stack up a lot of true damage with Dragon Strat 4 and her weapon. So the damage reduction does stack multiplicatively, but the true damage does stack up additively. So you're able to get a lot of true damage and, kill opponents. But unfortunately, she doesn't really have any kind of special acceleration to retaliate back with Glimmer. And obviously, she cannot really get the support with Thor without compromising on some stats. So you can try and use her with Fallen Ninian, for example, and give her the special acceleration. And then she can easily trigger and retaliate back with Glimmer, while still taking advantage of the finish kill by being within 3 spaces of her allies and still getting all of the effects out of her weapon. And I would only recommend distant counter at high or max investment, otherwise just stacking up stats with like solo skill or bonus doubler is going to be doing you fine. So the amount of skills and the kind of builds that you can make with her is definitely pretty limited, but still you can try and use her in Summoner Duels where I think she works the best. And there I think having low attack speed is really helpful because the other units cannot really outstat you in the attack or speed. So that is going to be really good when you're stacking up so many stats with Legendary Eliwood and being this high invested kind of dragon. And especially when you have Might of Myriads as a captain skill, this is going to be very powerful because she's going to be able to get the distant counter effect without really, spending her Sacred Seal. You can even give her null follow-up out of Fallen Lilith, and that is going to be a good long-range support if you don't really want to use that as a Sacred Seal. So that's also an option. And then finally, if you want to use her in Arena, you can still do that with Sea Duel Infantry 4, even though she's not the best unit there because Arena units do tend to stay close to each other. But still, you can try and use her if you have units who can send her away. And because she's a dragon unit, she can score high as a 190 BST unit. So that is one of the reasons why some people may want to use her because of her scoring. Cynthia gets a pretty amazing weapon refine that goes well with her personality and gives her a lot of stats and effects. So Lance of Heroics gives her +4 to all of her stats, and it also has Wings of Mercy 4 built into it, which means that if any kind of ally is at 80% HP or lower, then Cynthia can just teleport beside them. So this can be really useful for Galeforce teams, especially if you're using, double Fury unit who has just taken Fury damage. So usually a lot of double Fury Galeforce builds need to participate in 2 combats, and with Cynthia you can basically just teleport after their first combat. She also has Omni Clash built into this weapon, so she can get extra attack, speed, defense, and resistance in combat depending on the spaces moved by whoever initiated, +4. So at max she's able to get +12 out of this, and that is really good, and it does work with the Wings of Mercy 4 built into her weapon because the game basically calculates the spaces moved. It doesn't matter if you warp or you actually move the tiles. So that is really helpful for getting a lot of stats in combat. And then finally she also has Spectrum Unity. So she doesn't really care about any kind of debuff and is able to use the Unity skill to good effect. So with this weapon refined, Cynthia is basically able to get +16 to all of her stats and doesn't have to run Wings of Mercy in her slot B if she wants to function in a Galeforce team, which means that it opens up the options of running a Trace skill or a Flow skill, and that is really helpful for many Galeforce teams, honestly. And the fact that you can have the Unity effect built into this means that you can actually stack it up with attack speed Unity and double down on it, and definitely gain a lot more stats whenever you are debuffed on those stats. So overall, Cynthia can work pretty well in the player phase as a Galeforce unit in Aether Raids offense and also as a mixed phase unit. But still, because she's a Grail unit, I wouldn't really recommend investing into her unless you're thinking of merging her up and investing Dragon Flowers into her, because she definitely needs those stats to function, because as a flyer she doesn't really have access to Flashing Blade 4 or like any kind of other special acceleration. So Heavy Blade is the only thing that she has got, which kinda is a bit annoying. And she also doesn't have -1 special cooldown in her weapon. So Galeforce is at 5 cooldown, so you will need Quick and Pulse or some kind of effect to bring it down to 4 cooldown. But we do have some pretty good support units which can help with that. Cynthia can work pretty well in the Astro season with Thor, giving her the Warbreaker support, so she doesn't really need to run Heavy Blade Sacred Seal because triggering that would be a bit annoying, especially in Aether Raids with how high the attack stats can get. And overall, Cynthia is going to be a pretty solid Grail Lance Flyer. So if you want to build her up, then you can give her the standard Flyer build with the Cat skill, Trace skill, and the Rain skill. So with this, you're able to get the maximum offenses, and you don't really need to run Clash skill on her because it's actually anti-synergetic with the Unity effect that she's got. So Catch is pretty much the best skill that you can run for the max offenses, and then the Near Trace skill is going to be really useful for the mobility. Even after you teleport, you're going to be able to move one space, so that is really helpful. And if you want to invest into her for mainly a player phase focused build, then Surge Sparrow is going to be an option with Flow Guard. So getting the partial null follow-up is something that you can appreciate because even though Cynthia can get a lot of stats in the combat with this weapon, she's missing out on some key effects like partial null follow-up. So having the Flow skill can really help you with that. And you can also run her with the Unity skill, like I said, just for doubling down on those stats. So if she gets debuffed for attack and speed, then she's going to be getting a lot of stats, and she doesn't really care about, getting panicked or anything like that. So you can definitely buff her up and use her with Speed Smoke 4 in the mixed phase, and there are not too many options that she can run in her slot B, so the Near Trace skill is pretty good for the mobility and just for the positioning. So you can run her with that and pretty much function in the mixed phase. Now, like I said, competitively, she's going to be useful in Aether Raids offense as a Galeforce unit, and you are going to be having option with either the Trace skill or the Flow skill. Personally, as someone who pretty much Galeforces in most of his matches, I think that the Flow skill is going to be a bit better because there are a lot of units with follow-up negation, there are a lot of, near safe tanks, and, Cynthia getting so many stats is really helpful so that, she can double those kinds of units. So I would personally want Flow Guard or any kind of Flow skill for that matter so that you can have that partial null follow up, and then you can run Quick and Pulse so that you can bring Galeforce to 4 cooldown. And because you're going to be using Thor as your initiator, you can pretty much use the Warbreaker and use that to Galeforce. And like I said before, because of the 80% Wings of Mercy that she has got, you can actually use her with a Thor that is running Double Fury build. And right after the first combat of Thor, she's going to be able to teleport. So that definitely opens up your options. And if you're someone without Winter Bernadetta or like without Brave Lysithea, then you can definitely use the Double Fury Thor build and use Cynthia with her. So she's going to be a pretty unique partner with Thor in a Galeforce team. And if you want to see how you can function with a Thor Force team, you can definitely check out my video right above in the corner. So that can definitely give you an idea. I feel like Aether Raids offense is going to be her main competitive usage with that Wings of Mercy built in. So she can be used with the Double Fury initiators pretty much. And she can also be used in Arena with B Dual Flying 4. And you can just run her with Attack Speed Oath 4 and have like a lot of teleportation shenanigans by providing your team with the guidance support. And she already has Wings of Mercy built in. So if they fall below that threshold, then she can teleport as well. So that can be really helpful just to, maneuver around the map. And flying units are definitely going to be having that edge on the arena maps. So she can help you there even though she cannot really score the highest. And you can easily run a Sacred Seal like Guidance or Ground Orders so that she can be a hero to her allies by supporting them. The final unit of this Refine batch is Python, and unfortunately his Refine is not the greatest. If you remember, this is pretty much the same Refine as Fanged Basilikos that Linus got like a year ago. And it did work for him because he's a melee unit, and for Python the priorities are a bit different. He's mainly going to be used in Aether Raids offense, in Aether Raids defense, for breaking through far safe tanks, or at least trying to. So this kind of weapon refine doesn't really help him too much in his niche, especially as a bulky cavalier, because Python was always one of those cavaliers that had more defense than a lot of them, and that was pretty much his niche. But unfortunately, this weapon doesn't really try to build upon that. So I know that many Python players are going to be really disappointed, and they might just prefer running Whitecap bow so that they can get the quad attacks, or even wait for an arcane bow if that happens this month. So with this weapon refine, he's able to get +5 to his attack and speed, and he can get +7 true damage per hit. So this can definitely help him with his damage output. He can also debuff the opponent in combat for -5 speed and defense debuff. And then finally, he does have the in-combat panic on foes' speed and defense buffs. So this is the part which really depends on the enemy, and if the enemy does not have any kind of buffs, then this part of refine doesn't really do much. So essentially with this weapon refine, he's able to get +10 effective attack and speed and that true damage. So he pretty much trades that -1 special cooldown that Linus has for the +7 true damage that he can get per hit. So this does improve his offenses, but then again, if you want to be purely offensive, then Whitecap Bow Plus is an option. And if you want to be defensive, then Plagian Bow or Spendthrift Bow is an option. And unfortunately, this weapon really doesn't do much for his bulk. If it tried to have the in-combat panic to foes attack, that would have been pretty good. So this weapon is pretty much just missing out on like 1 or 2 like good effects from making Python pretty good. But unfortunately, it is kind of like a copy-paste of a weapon refine that we got a year ago. So that is a bit sad for Python users. But if you want to stack up speed on him and you simply want to get the true damage, then this weapon refine can work for you. But as far as I've seen, most of the Python users are pretty disappointed, and I can definitely understand why. Because Python's niche was definitely a bit different, and with this weapon refine, he doesn't really get like partial null follow-up to break through a lot of far safe tanks and their follow-up negation effects, and he's not really going to be hitting as hard as he should be for trying to break through those far safe tanks when he was used in Aether Raids defense. And he was definitely a pretty popular unit, but with time he kind of fell off because far safe tanks just got a lot bulkier. He can function in Aether Raids defense with this kind of bow for sure, because the enemies are going to be buffing up their speed and defense, so it can give you some mileage there. But still, he's not going to be able to exactly take out a lot of the far safe tanks, even if they're blue. I would only suggest investing into Python if you're going to be going all the way with the merges and dragon flowers, or if you got him as a Forma Soul with the premium skills. So if you got him as a Forma Soul, then you probably got a build like this with the Cat skill, with the Trace skill, and the Menace skill. So attack speed Menace or attack defense Menace can work out with this build, and Deadeye is definitely going to be pretty good. So in that regard, your premium skills have definitely paid off. Keep in mind that Lull skills actually do not have good synergy with his weapon, like Lull attack speed or Lull speed defense, especially because he does want the opponents to have the visible buff so that he can inflict the in-combat panic. So Lull skills are not the best for the slot B, and the only option that kind of remains is pretty much the Fortress skill that you probably got for the Forma Soul. So you can just run this build with this Weapon Refine and function with that. And you can also use him in Aether Raids defense, like I said. That was pretty much one of the main competitive uses of Python because of his physical bulk. And, you know, we had Brave Hector as the premier far-safe tank, but now we have a lot more far-safe tanks that can definitely destroy him. And he's not going to be able to do that much damage to them, but you can definitely try and narrow down your matchups with Blue Feud and try to take care of the blue far-safe tanks like Ascended Idun and Brave Hector. And Guard is going to be pretty helpful skill in case they have Hardy Fighter or any kind of special accelerating skill. And Attack Speed Push 4 can work in the Dark Season with Medius, as you're not going to be taking any kind of recall damage. So you could try and hyper optimize him for the Aether Raids defense and run him with a Brattle Catcher team. So because he gets the true damage per hit, he can basically get 14 true damage with the Brave hit. But unfortunately, because of not having, you know, partial null follow-up, many times he's going to be stopped in his tracks. But still, with the Guard, I hope that he can annoy some of the far-safe tanks. And you can also use him with Speed Preempt. So with this Weapon Refine, it does open the usage of Speed Preempt because he is pretty much going to be inflicting the in-combat panic on the opponent, and he can get the extra speed with this. So Speed Preempt definitely has the viability at a max investment, and you can run him with Speed Smoke 4 so that he can get that damage reduction. And it can definitely help you in some of the physical matchups because Python does have that defense and does have that HP. So even if he doesn't kill someone with Speed Preempt, you can at least try and survive the hit with the damage reduction of Speed Smoke 4. So pretty much the same concept as Brave Violet, but at a much lower scale. But this is definitely something you can run on him with this new Weapon Refine. Finally, if you did invest into him with Plus and Merge, and you got an Ocher, and if you really want to use him in Arena, then G-Duel Cavalry 4 is an option, and you just want to have a Fortress skill and a Menace skill to work in Arena. Make sure to share this video with your friends if they're trying to build up any of these units with the new refines, and if you enjoyed, then please be sure to leave a like and a comment. Helps you tremendously, and if you really enjoyed, you could always support my work directly by using super thanks down below or by becoming a YouTube member. And for more FEH analysis videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because YouTube sub boxes show my videos as many times as the amount of allies that Fallen Corrin needs within 2 spaces. So with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.